Right, let's speak now to Baroness Kate Hoey, independent peer, of course, a former Labour MP. Kate, it's fantastic to have you on the programme. Let's kick off with what came out yesterday, which is the astonishing, eye-watering migration figures. This is according to statistics from the OECD, saying that when it comes to the League Table of Developed Nations, of people who have come here to permanently settle, well, we're top of the charts in proportion to our size. I'm not particularly sure that this is an accolade that we should be cherishing.
Well, I think the figures, I mean, they were expected because the changes that the Conservative government made last year won't really hit in until the coming year. You know, they stopped the idea that if you come into the country to work, you can kind of almost automatically bring your families with you, which meant that there were a lot of extra people coming who weren't actually contributing to the economy, but were in many ways taking away from, taking things that they were entitled to. So that stopped. So next year, the figures will go down. But until we decide really to have a cap of some kind that actually says this is what our country can afford to have, because I think people forget, a lot of people forget, unless they're actually involved in it in their own area, seeing how the effects of so many extra people makes on just the normal day life, like getting into your GP surgery, all the issues that, a lot of people up at the top of the tree in what's sometimes seen as the establishment don't really understand, because they're not affected by it in the way that other people are when they can't get their children into the school they want, they can't get a doctor's appointment, they can't get a dentist appointment. And then they discover that there's a lot of new people who've come into the country who aren't really contributing. Their husband might be, their wife might be, but there's a lot of extra people. And I think we just have to have that serious debate. And the problem is the governments don't want to have that debate. They don't want to talk to people because they know the answer they'll get.
Right. I also think, we need to be brave enough to talk about things like cultural disintegration as well. And we have successive governments telling us this is all about skills shortages. And yet too many people who come to this country can't even speak the English language, which to me seems to mitigate any of the skills they may then be able to use in daily life if you can't communicate with your fellow workers. And I think that this is something else that when it comes to the middle classes or the metropolitan classes, they're somewhat shrouded from. If they go to work in a hospital with a surgeon from Iraq, then guess what? That person's probably got similar cultural mores, speaks good English, and the working relationship is going to be pretty good. But if you happen to work on a production line with somebody who's come into this country, or someone's doing repairs on your roof and they can't speak any English, or the dependence of someone who's come to work in low-skilled work who can't speak English, this ends up leading to a fragmented society, because the basic tenets of people getting along, sharing, cooperating, living in harmony is surely to be able to communicate.
Yes, communication is absolutely crucial. It also breaks down barriers too, which of course we're not having, because more and more people coming in and living in their own cultural area, keeping very much to their own cultural identity. I've said before on even this program that I think everyone who comes into this country has to learn to speak English. They must be. We can't allow all this extra money, that huge amounts of money that are being spent on translations in hospitals, in other public facilities, for people who are not even trying to learn. There are many communities still, I'm afraid, in parts of this country where the female members of the family are not even encouraged or allowed to learn to speak the language, because that their culture is that women don't need to be able to go out and do things and contribute in any way. And that we've got to stop all that. But we're not going to stop any of this or until we are able to have a genuine feeling that there is free speech and that people can say what they want, and that governments are actually listening. And I'm afraid neither the past government or what this current government is doing is showing any signs that they have learned from some of the things that have happened in the past. And I've just come back from America, actually, and not for the election, but I happened to be there during the election. And it was I was occasionally listening to some things that were happening over here when you hear the news from America. And it was very, very interesting, actually, to hear actually the issue that seemed to get to the news most in America about Britain in the last week was the Archbishop of Canterbury. That was the big story, I suppose, because there are a lot of Anglicans in America. But, you know, we really... I was just astonished when I heard about the Alison Pearson case. You know, there's so many things that are happening that you just can't believe that this is our country that we've always felt was leading the world in democracy and in free speech and in all those things. And you know, something really badly has gone wrong.
Yeah, no, it has. And I've been saying all morning, Kate, that I think that people like you and I just go, we're not playing the game anymore. We're going to say what we think. And, you know, if the police come knock at my door, so be it. I'm happy to be a martyr for the cause. Let's talk now about comments made by the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, who, here we go, is like 2016 all over again. 0.5% growth. Woohoo! Upwards trajectory. We should all celebrate that. But apparently the lack of growth is down to Brexit. I'm not sure I really believe that.
Well, I mean, they don't give up. I'm afraid those people who didn't want us to leave in the first place then tried to stop us for 3 or 4 years to leave, and it made it that we ended up with an agreement that really wasn't in our, you know, could have been so much better if our government had been tough. I'm afraid now they're continuing this idea that if only we were back in the European Union, everything would be wonderful. And that is now being helped and fostered by a government that really wants to go back in but can't quite bring themselves yet.
Well, it's funny. You say that. I mean, they keep saying, well, we want a closer relationship, but we won't rejoin the single market, we won't rejoin the customs union. And my belief is, ironically here, that the current government we've got have probably done more with Brexit than the previous one. They're pushing hard on things like Great British Energy, putting the government back in control of private assets. They want to renationalise the railways. This sort of idea that a state takes back sovereignty of some of its public services instead of tendering it out, you know, across all of Europe to the best bidder is very much against the EU's project. So I wonder, now they've sort of forced out some of these policies in the first 3 months of office, if they go and sit around the negotiating table in Brussels and say, OK, we want this, that and the other for frictionless trade, that they'll suddenly find themselves in the position that previous Brexit negotiators were when the EU says, do you know what, fine, but you want to renationalise the railway? Not under the Single Railways Directive, not under our watch.
Well, actually, that's one of the reasons why, if you remember, during the Brexit, you know, the campaign to leave, the RMT union was was probably the only real union that really put in any effort to back leave, because they understood that. And similarly with the CWU, the Post Office Union, because of course in Europe the whole way that the Post Office and Royal Mail was handled was something that they didn't like. So I mean, I hope you're right. There's no doubt about it that the more you know about what goes on inside the European Union and how it works, the more cynical you become. I mean, that was one of the reasons I started to become very, very cynical, was when I was a minister and would have to go over to Brussels and saw how they worked and saw the bureaucracy and the scratching each other's backs in order to get things. And there's no problem with cooperating with all our European neighbours and indeed other countries. And obviously the Commonwealth is very important to me, but I still feel that there is at the top, the very top, I mean, we mustn't forget that Keir Starmer was key to the fight back in the Commons to try and stop us leaving. So there are certainly things that they have done that they might not have been able, they wouldn't have been able to do if we hadn't left. And we just hope that that they will continue to realise that if we really want to be an economically productive country and a country that can look to the world, then we don't need to be bound by the shackles of the European Union.
Right.
It's a past. It's a past.
It's the past. I actually think interesting. It's funny because David Lammy at the Commonwealth Summit over in Samoa was saying that actually instead of reparations, we need to forge better trade deals with the Commonwealth. Guess what? We couldn't do that inside the EU. I think that Donald Trump could be quite pivotal as well when it goes to the interlocution between the UK and the US about bringing back a US trade deal to the table, because he's no fan of the EU, and I think we'll sort of make that quite clear. Now, I've got some good news here, I suppose, or it's sort sort of tinged with horror. Police have finally dropped a terrifying investigation into a gender-critical activist over a tweet she posted. This is Maya Forstater, who's the executive director of Sex Matters. They campaign for clarity about sex in law and policy. Well, she was told last night that police would be taking no further action over the post on X. She was investigated for 15 months. 15 months by Scotland Yard after a claim that her June 2023 post about a transgender GP was allegedly a malicious communication. She's an award-winning writer. Investigated by Essex Police, them again, they seem to have past form in this, for allegedly stirring up racial hate. I mean, it's just like, this is madness. 15 months to investigate a tweet. Yeah. You don't even need 15 seconds. You go, those are words, done, case closed.
Yeah, it's but I think, I mean, that's good news. I haven't heard that, but I think it's, you know, the fight back is beginning on this issue and on other issues. And I think, you know, they chose the wrong person in picking on Alison Pearson, because she's going to fight this very, very hard. But also, I think more and more people are recognising that some of this sort of nonsense about gender is just, you know, destroying kind of relationships right across families and communities, and is complete and utter nonsense. I mean, people understand this, but a lot of people are afraid to speak out. Yeah. And the more people who can speak out and say, look, we're not going to have this, we're not going to allow all these silly things to happen in our primary schools, the better. And people have to be confident that they'll get backed up. And they should all join the Free Speech Union, which would make a great difference, because they've been so wonderful about helping legally people who've got into difficulty like this.
I think it's all about now a concerted community effort to push back against this. Baroness Kate Hoey, thank you ever so much.